So hi, I'm Tom Langford. I'm MD of Potting Shed here in Guernsey. Potting Shed is a creative agency specialising in brand design. We've been going about 15 years and I'd like to thank you all so much for coming here and giving up your lunch hour to listen to me waffle. I will be waffling, but my aim is to provide you hopefully with some helpful advice and guidance on how you can implement a visual brand into your business and some understanding on why that's so important. So does anyone here work for a business or own a business? Good, a couple of people, good. I feel like there's more of you, but you just didn't know how to use your arms quick enough. Good work on the target audience there, Alice. So hopefully this will be useful to some of you. And apologies if anyone came along because they saw my photo and they thought someone much younger was going to come and speak today, but obviously I am clearly a lot older than I was in that photo. Will you go out with me? Not all of you. Before we get onto things, people often get a bit confused about the difference between marketing and brand, and so I thought it would be helpful to clarify. And someone much cleverer than me came up with this really nice construct of explaining the difference between those two things. And the way they explained it was that marketing is like asking someone out on a date, and brand is the reason that you say yes or you say no. So marketing is like the act of walking up to someone and selling yourself. It's that sales pitch. But branding is everything about you. Your name, your clothes, your history, the way you talk, your attitude. And all of that's going to be really important in them deciding whether they say yes or no. And branding does apply to people as well as businesses. Me, for example, if I turn up for a meeting, most people don't think that I work for a finance company. So already, I'm giving across some information about the kind of person that I am. Once upon a time, at Potting Shed, we like to think of brands as stories. They're different narratives being told at different times to different audiences, but they're all kind of telling the same story. And we'll come back onto that. That'll sort of weave its way into this presentation. This is a mirror ball. It's a visual representation of a mirror, in case you didn't get that. It's not a great image, but actually finding a good picture of a mirror on stock was actually quite a bit harder than I thought, so I went with this one. And again, at Potting Shed, we see our role as trying to accurately reflect the quality of service and the quality of business that you have. So we like to think of it as holding up a mirror to your business. Your brand gives an opportunity for you to say something about your business. You can say it through color, typography, imagery, graphics. If you think of how Nike uses their color to help convey a sense of energy, there's orange and blacks, they're really punchy, powerful color combinations. Or Apple uses typography and interface design to get across its sort of expertise in tech. Everything's clean, simple, elegant, just like their technology when it works. And even brands like Cillit Bang, God, I'm showing my age here. Cillit Bang, anyone remember Cillit Bang? Their cheesy voiceovers and everything, they were giving us a sense of how cheap that brand was. They wanted to get across that cheapness. And there's loads of products that, mainly in the products category, but loads of things represent their cost effectiveness through their brand as well. So we're not always trying to make things seem expensive. So how do we put all that thinking together and when building a brand? So I'm going to talk you through a few examples of some projects that Potting Shed have worked on and how we utilize that sort of thinking when thinking about the visual brand and the brand design. So going back to the sort of storytelling nature of brands, this, imagine you can't see this, right? This is just in the same typeface as everything else, but imagine you've just heard this word, kabuki. What do we get from that name? There's no visual information, just hearing it. Already we start to get a sense that it's something to do with the Far East. There's a sense of energy, those Ks, very powerful letters, very energetic. And Potting Shed were actually involved in this project right from the naming of the event. I don't think we came up with the name, but we were discussing with the client what it was. And it's a charity ball. So when we add the words charity ball, we start to get more of a sense of what the what this is. We know it's an actual event, probably something to do with the Far East. And so we've not seen anything visual yet, but already we're starting to sort of feel some of those narratives coming through. Now we add the logo. Okay, so we know it's definitely something to do with the Far East. We start to build a mental picture of the kind of night that it might be if we were to attend. It's probably going to be beautiful, exciting, quite high-end execution. And now if we add some visual identity is sort of adding to the logo, providing us with more visual information, and adding to the story. And here's some pictures of the event itself, and you can see that all of it embraced that same visual language. And I'm not saying that, or the visual language embraced the same thing as the event itself. So the story was being consistently told across all of those different points, from the visual identity, all the collateral, right through to the event itself. It was a brilliant event. Beautifully executed, yeah, and the brand was completely in line with the event itself. So we gave people the right information before they attended. Here's another example: bank clarity. So if we just hear the name, what do we kind of infer from that? We get that it's a bank, and clarity sounds like it's going to be less confusing than other banks. And then if we add the logo, we can see that it's really slick, high-end, professional. There's a sense that it differs from a high street bank, and that's right. It doesn't look like an HSBC or a Barclays. And in fact, this is a B2B bank, so it wants to appeal to businesses rather than individuals. If we add some visual identity, it looks different. It looks high-end. It looks professional, exclusive, possibly quite expensive. And those are all narratives to help it attract the right audiences and hold up a mirror to the business. Does Bank Clarity want to attract individuals looking for a current account? No, it doesn't. And that audience, rightly, would be put off by the brand. So that's a good thing. No business should want to attract loads of customers that are not right for it. Nike doesn't want to attract loads of people looking for smart workwear shoes. Guinness doesn't want to attract loads of people who want energy drinks. Hugo Boss doesn't want to attract loads of people who want cheap suits. So every brand is trying to hold up a mirror to their business and attract the right kind of target audience. Like a field of flowers, each flower trying to attract a different insect. Little Big Brew Co, but probably loads of you have seen this around local beer. But it's interesting because it's a retail example, so I threw this one in. And again, straight away from the name, you're going to get the sense that it's something to do with alcohol. And alcohol products often work in a different way than business brands because the product is more prominent. So the label ends up being more important than the logo, for example, but as a whole, the visual identity still has to work together to tell the story. And we can see that from the colours and the typography. This brand is bold, bright, it wants to be different. And in fact, when we first started working with Little Big Brew Co, one of their initial comments for us was, look, at some point in the future, we want to be on the stores in Waitrose in the UK. And we want to be able to stand out on a very busy shelf. So, that forms part of our brief. And you can see here that, yeah, we really went for it with some making it look different. But there's also this kind of storytelling aspect that really runs through this brand as well. The names of the beers, not only are they something completely different than has been seen, hopefully, anywhere else, but they all have names of people, and so that each beer is its own character. So there's this kind of story on the back of each beer that related to the beer and the person. So it really embraced this idea of storytelling. This is my last example that I'm going to show you. And so again, we just got a name, the Don. And what do we start to get from that? You know, there's this little nod to the mafia, the era of the speakeasy. And this one was for a bar and restaurant in Jersey. And they really wanted it to have a Jekyll and Hyde kind of personality. So in the daytime, it's quite corporate. It's the kind of place that, you know, we might go for a business lunch, have a nice time. And you can see it all looks quite straightforward. But in the night time, it's got this darker side to it. And I can never remember which one is Jekyll and which one's Hyde. But yeah, it's got that darker side to it. So what we did was we use special inks that get revealed under spot UV lighting. So in the bar itself, in the night time, they switch on the UV lighting, and then this sort of secondary brand is revealed within all the collateral. So it's quite clever, quite sexy. So that was a really interesting way to use this idea of storytelling and visual identity to get across the nature of that business. And of course, you know, when you're experiencing that because you are there, so you don't have, you know, we didn't have to really work as hard as this because they've already gone into the bar, but it's all these little touches that add to the story. So what's your story? What are you trying to get across with your brand? Good questions to ask yourselves are like, what does your business do? What, are you cheap? Are you expensive? Are you exclusive? Are you safe? Innovative? Dynamic? And are those narratives coming across in your visual brand? Are you holding up a mirror to your business? And look, lots of clients come in to see Potting Shed, and frankly they're quite embarrassed because they come in and they've had the same visual identity, same brand for like 5-10 years, and they sort of tell us about the business and they say, this is what we do, this is us, this is how cool we are, this is how innovative we are, this is what we're doing. And then we look at the website and they go, oh God, don't even look at it. And I always say to them, look, you shouldn't be embarrassed, because what's happened is at a point in time, you created a brand and a visual identity, and it was correct. It did hold up a mirror to your business. And since that point in time, over the last 5-10 years, your business has progressed and it's grown and it's evolved and it's become better, and you offer lots more services or much less services. But you know, you are a different business to what you were in that point in time. But your brand and your visual identity have stayed exactly where they were. So they just need to catch up. So it's not a case of being embarrassed, but it does take time and effort and energy to consistently and continually evolve your visual identity and your brand. And often we do a lot of logo design, and actually we don't recommend people change their logos too often. But your visual identity can evolve even though your logo stays the same. You can still progress your visual brand even with your logo staying the same. Like lots of people will just have, you know, a business card which has their logo on, and you know, as long as your typography doesn't change, you can kind of keep that business card flowing for many years, whereas your website might change much more dramatically. So it's quite useful to kind of test this out for yourselves and to think about all the things you think you would love your business to be known for. Think about all those narratives that you think might be important. And you know, is anyone? It's probably all got businesses here that are, you know, either innovative or cheap or luxury or whatever. So if you think about what those are, and then go back and look at your collateral, website's usually the easiest one. Try and look at it with fresh eyes and see if that story is being told, and see if that story is being reflected in the way that you present yourself. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much me. So look, thank you. And if anyone has any questions that they want to ask me.
if you see a brand or see an advert and it repels you, that is, for a good company, that's on purpose.
If they've done it well and they've done it right and it's purposeful, then it's a good thing, yeah. Because if you, let's say you're looking for a new car and you've got a budget of 10 grand and you see a Lexus advert and it's going to try and sell you a car for 50 grand, you know, they don't necessarily want you walking into their showroom and taking up their valuable time because you're not going to buy a Lexus for 50 grand. So yeah, there's an appropriateness, I suppose. I think most brands wouldn't use the word repel, I suppose. That's maybe a bit strong, but yes.
If I find it pretentious.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, something that's pretentious, you know, it's not attracting you. There's probably nothing wrong with that from their perspective. Yeah, hopefully it's just a good, it's going to offer them a good return on investment on their marketing spend. ROMI, I think, Alice, wasn't it? Yeah.
And random aside, it's Mr. Hyde, because unless he actively contributed to Dr. Jekyll getting his doctorate, he's very much a Mr.
Oh, Mr. Hyde, right, thank you, yeah, I did know that, and at one point in my life I knew that, but I'd forgotten that, yeah. Any other questions? I will repeat a little bit there for John, because the mic's not picking you up, but yeah, there was, I mean, sex still does sell, but I think you've got to be a bit more subtle about it these days, and yeah, there's not so many car adverts with scantily clad women draped over the bonnets, and probably that's a good thing. Probably.
I'm just curious about branding. When you're sort of dealing with a retail product, I suppose it's quite easy. You've got a single focus of who you want to sell that to. But some companies have multiple services underneath their umbrella. How do you tailor the brand, I suppose in short, to say, look, we're open to everyone because we have these different skills? It's quite a challenging thing to do, I imagine.
That is a challenging thing to do. And there's a lot of businesses out there that are very big and you would think they appeal to lots of different people, but actually they've gone, who are our key target audience? And because Apple appeals to lots of different people. You know, my parents got Apple phones, but that doesn't mean that they're not targeting their advertising at my parents. They're targeting them at my kids, basically, because that's their ideal target audience, and then other people also pick it up. But there was a great, we saw a talk by a really cool creative agency from Norway, I think they were from, called Snask. And their strapline was make enemies and gain fans. And the idea was that in order to get some people to really love you, you've got to get some people to really hate you. You know, and it's okay to piss some people off in order that other people actually, you know, become part of your tribe. So I think the danger with going, we appeal to everybody, so therefore we've got to make this appeal to everybody, is what you do is you create something that really doesn't appeal to anybody. It's generic enough that nobody gets put off by it, but it's so generic that nobody gets turned on by it either. So I think we do a lot of work with clients trying to uncover what their DNA is, why it is that they get up in the morning and go to work and are passionate about what they do. And that usually leads on neatly to having a much more clear and confident idea about what that brand should look like and what it should feel like, and therefore how we visually get that across.
What's the biggest mistake that you see most of your clients coming in with that you have to sort of unravel or try and unpick?
It is usually that sort of not a lack of clarity and a lack of pinning their sort of flag to the mast, or whatever the phrase is, and being really clear about what it is they believe in, what it is that they want to convey. We've had clients come in who've had websites with reams and reams of copy, and they've got like this one phrase in there that's brilliant and really bold and says exactly, but they've hidden it like within like 5 paragraphs of waffle. And it's this sort of fear of putting your head above the parapet and actually standing for something. And I think once you've clarified, oh yeah, actually we're really good at this, this is what we do, this is how we do it, and this is why we do it, it becomes much easier to be bold and to stand out. And I think all brands, Potting Shed often gets people coming in and saying, oh, look, I really like your work, it's really bright, it's really bold, it's really colourful. And usually that's not really us pushing clients in that direction, but once they understand what it is they want to be known for, there's kind of very little point. Even, I was going to say there's very little point not standing out, but I don't mean that you always have to be bright, bold and colourful. If you've got like a private members club, you might do a very simple monotone brand that's black on black using spot UVs, and you can hardly see the logo and all that kind of stuff. But that gets across this idea of secrecy and exclusivity, and that's what they want to get across. So it's not always about being bright and bold and colourful, but it is about being appropriate. And I think too many brands don't know what it is that they are trying to get across, and so that's where there's a struggle. We always say to clients, especially when we're doing logo design, we never want a client to tell us what they want it to look like. We want them to tell us what they want it to feel like, and then our job is to interpret that visually.
I'm just thinking back to your previous point that you made about being too generic. So it's an issue that I had with one of my brands, which is called the Women's Investment Network, which I set up to inspire women to become more engaged with their finances. And people quite often said to me, so this is why I'm not putting you on the spot, so it's just an observation, that, well, who is your target audience? And I couldn't help but say all women, because I wanted women, I still do, from the earliest years to women that are more my age. I want all women to become, to understand how to deal with their finances and the world of money management and so on, so much better. So I could never, and I understand totally the concept of, obviously having a target market, but I could never narrow it down because...
To be fair, you're trying to narrow it down by age, and maybe that was the wrong thing to try and narrow it down by, because really, if we think about it, you were trying to attract women who had a certain amount of money, because they're going to need that amount of money to be able to invest. So women with a relatively high disposable income who might have an interest in investing. I mean, great thing is you already narrowed it down by like half the population immediately, which is more than a lot of our clients try and do. So.
And actually, I take your point, but it wasn't specifically about money, because again, going back to the younger people, I want them to do a savings plan for 50 quid or £100 a month. So it wasn't necessarily, just the women who can afford it, because I literally...
But I would say in a way, you probably ended up with, let's say, 5 different product areas there. One of them for the starter package, kind of younger people who you're trying to encourage to invest. All the way up to high net worth females who, but your brand overall your logo can be the same for all, but you might end up with different styles of communications for each of those different audiences. So it doesn't have to be a one size fits all, but you do tend to find that the companies that do really well have niched down and have really focused in on their core target audience and are doing things solely for them, and then if other people come, great. And in fact, I read something ages ago, and they've probably changed since then, but McDonald's, their core target audience was people who eat fast food more than 4 times a week. And you think, well, that's really bad for us, right? But that's who they were aiming all their marketing at. Everyone else was secondary, but we were all still influenced by that marketing, but it wasn't necessarily targeted primarily at us. There's loads of people in their 50s in marketing, and I think that person in particular probably just didn't want to work in marketing in their 50s. But I think that you get lots. In fact, the older demographic has got the most disposable income, and there's a great chap called Dave Trott who writes an awful lot, who's probably in his 60s, maybe even 70s now, and he's been in advertising all his life, and he's absolutely brilliant, won loads of awards, and he tries to push his clients to stop bloody trying to, they've got Lexus adverts or whatever, and they're making it look like it's going to appeal to a 21-year-old, and you're like, do you know most people who buy Lexuses are 50 plus because they've got loads of money and they want a really nice, safe, reliable car that looks kind of flashy. So he's trying to flip it on its head and say, actually, you should be appealing to your target audience is wrong. So yeah, I disagree with I mean, I'm not in marketing, I'm in brand, and that is slightly different, but I do get what you mean. I think, you know, advertising is quite quick, fast-paced, you know, it's quite high energy, and that probably does put some people off with a plus 50.
What I found was, using the example of where I work, at KG5, our website is really, it really a lot of work on it, and there's an awful lot of words, there's a lot of stuff on there.
Yep.
As a general rule, what do you suggest? It's like the amount of, you know, on a website you can have so many pages and so much information. What is the website really trying to do? Are you trying to set, like, sort of encourage people to come to, or come, like, look at your product, visit the place that you're talking about, if that's, depending on obviously your type of business? Because to me it seems quite difficult to decide what should go on there and what is almost surface.
I think you've asked the right question, is what is your website trying to do? And actually, if we take, I'm going to start with an easy one, right? Because professional services, there's non-transactional. People just go onto the web, you know, let's say we've got a law firm or fund admin business. 9 times out of 10, the people who are going to go onto that website are going there to validate the business. So they've had a meeting, let's say I work for a fund admin business. They've had a meeting with me, they then go away, they say to their line manager, oh, actually, Tom, you seemed all right. Yeah, I think maybe we should progress. Line manager goes, right, okay, let's have a look at the website. They have a look at the website. Does that website say the same sort of thing that I was saying? Does it reflect the same sort of values? Yes, cool, okay, how can we get in touch with them? Like, they're going to look through minimal amount of information, and their next action point is going to be getting in touch. KG5, you probably got more things like events that you need to tell people about. With websites, there is also the aspect of search engine optimization, and therefore lots of words can be useful for that. But a lot of the time that can be hidden away in the background. No one really needs to read it. It's just there for SEO purposes. But I'd say deciding what you want people to do, like if it's a non-transactional website, then all you're trying to do is give them information, and then what's their next step? Is it get in touch with you, or is it come along to that event or buy a ticket? If it's buying a ticket or something like that, more transactional, then yeah, there's probably going to be a little bit more work, and there's, you know, funnels of working, moving people through the user journey and stuff like that. But most websites, loads more copy than there needs to be. Most of our clients who walk in and say they need a new website, we say, cool, well, the great thing is you don't have to write as much copy as on your current website. All you've got to do is slim it right down, just get people to go through those, you know, does it give enough information for that next step, whatever that is? And usually that next step is get in touch.
Yeah, because I think a lot of times now people are kind of, you find a website and then it seems like most events and stuff go through social media side of things. Your website's almost just like a face to sort of go, oh, this is what we are.
You are 100% correct. The websites are terrible at creating demand. They're great at facilitating demand. If I already, like, the phrase surfing the web does no longer exist in our vocabulary. None of us go and just sit on the internet for an evening, just seeing where oh, you do, okay. Most of us, almost 99.9% of us do not do that. And so if I want to find out what's on at KG5, going to your website, that's great. But if I'm just sat at home and you're trying to encourage me to go out and, you know, attend a sporting event, or that you're running some other event there, your website is of no value to you whatsoever, because I'm not going there. So that's why social media, that's where marketing, I mean, websites kind of fall into this. We do websites and we do branding. We don't really do marketing. And for me, websites fall into the branding category because they are not going out there and pushing that message to anyone. What they're doing is when those messages come in, yeah, great, we've got some portal where you can go, you can find out all the information. Oh, look, there's our contact details. Yeah, give me a call. So yeah, finding out what it is you want your website to actually achieve. But I would say, yeah, I think you're right. You push stuff out on social media, you push people to your website to find out more information, and you can do great things with pixels and cookies and all this kind of stuff, and remarketing to them and all that kind of stuff. But ideally, yeah, you're hitting them on social media or other marketing channels and driving that traffic to the website. What's really interesting actually is because Facebook own Instagram, if you put an advert on Facebook and you've got, so let's say you've got Facebook and Instagram account and you put an advert on Facebook or you run it through Facebook, you can, and boost it for like £100 over the 2 weeks, you can say to Facebook, you decide how much of that spend goes on Facebook and how much goes on Instagram. And 9 times out of 10, it'll come back and it'll say, right, we spent you £100 and we spent 90 of it on Facebook and 10 of it on Instagram because there was 90 users or 90% of the users were on Facebook versus 10% on Instagram. So you can only do that with Facebook and Instagram because they're both owned by Facebook. Got the most users of any, I think Twitter is probably underutilized over here. What's your business?
Estate agency.
Right, okay. Well, you know, LinkedIn might be useful if you are, yeah, for the more business community.
Printed is old hat now, or do you feel there's still some value in printed?
I think there's still some value in it, but I think that, you know, again, going back to our ROMI, return on marketing investment, if you came to me and said, look, I've got £5,000, where should I spend it? I'd put it all on Facebook until you kind of exhausted Facebook and then start looking at other things. But you are going to reach different audiences. So your parish magazine is going to reach an audience who may not be on Facebook, but it's also going to cost you a lot more per interaction than your Facebook ad will. So the trouble is there's no one media that does it all. And if there was this, honestly, if there was this perfect, like, it all just worked, if you just do it like this, it all just worked, there'd be one marketing agency in the world and everyone would just go to them. Because it would just be, you know, this really straight, every business it works differently for, sometimes, you know, there's so many variables that it's not a really neat answer, but certainly I would say you're doing the right thing. Facebook, bit of LinkedIn. The school of thought is that no child will be on the same social media platform as their parents. So whilst my wife and I might be on Facebook and Instagram, our kids, you know, they're on TikTok and Snapchat and God knows what else instead. And so it does become more challenging to reach those people. And like you say, the readership of the press is dropping, although probably not according to them. You kind of answered your own question. How do you reach the Facebook generation? You know, you use Facebook. You've got to go onto the media channels that they use, and that's why we constantly have to embrace these new channels, whatever they are. And find ways to utilise them to our advantage to get those messages out. I mean, Facebook, the great thing about Facebook is it is a media company. They've made it really bloody easy for us to spend some money and reach some people, and they've made it much more cost effective for us to do that on Facebook than it is in the press, for example. I mean, actually, radio probably competes in terms of reach, but the effectiveness is harder to analyse because Facebook and everything is data. You can just look at it and you go, "Oh, I've reached this many people," as long as you trust that Facebook is telling you the truth.
I've got a question about brands. Do you follow trends? Is there, I don't know what you look at? Is there something that tells you what is trending at the moment in brands, what's popular at the moment? Is there something that's really in? And do you have to, obviously you do it for however many years, do you keep having to follow trends and keep up to speed with trends, or is it kind of thing that each brand that you create or that you help with, you're starting from scratch and you're not in a kind of what's popular now, what people tend to do?
I suppose there's quite long-term trends. I would say anything that's short-term you want to avoid in terms of creating a logo, particularly because then it's a fad and then you know you look outdated quite quickly. But there's definitely stuff that ends up being popular, and some of that is because of the usage of it. So, for example, all photographers back in the 90s used to have these big, long, tracked-out logos that were really, you know, so you have Carl Taylor, but it would take up, it's only this tall, but it would be like this wide. And to be fair, architects kind of followed that same theme to a degree, and that was quite popular. But then, you know, they started to have to put things on like digital media, and then, you know, these long tracked out logos didn't work very well anymore. So there's stuff from a practical perspective that evolves and changes. But I'd say beyond that, it's trying to like avoid fads rather than keeping up with trends. Yeah, if you look at most of the logos that have been around for a long time, you kind of look at them, and the good ones, you wouldn't know that they were, you wouldn't be able to see a significant difference between them that was done 20 years ago and something that was done yesterday in terms of how they're constructed. But certainly there are, there are certain messages that get sent out with certain attributes. So a serif logo with all the little kicks and it's all delicate and things like that, that's going to send a message that you're probably quite established, quite historical, quite safe and secure, but also kind of not very innovative and new and fresh. So something like that you would use appropriately, and I suppose that is used. A lot of logos used to use that kind of typography, and not many do now. And so that message has changed over time. So now, in a way, because that trend has changed, we now associate that style of typography with something that's old and established and heritage and all the rest of it. But that's kind of happened because of all the other things that have changed, rather than that becoming established in its own way.
A new font that comes out and you're like, okay, this is really cool new font, everyone's using this.
Those are the ones to be avoided. When you're doing logo design, I mean, there was a whole host of them, right, in the 90s with all the kind of digitally kind of typefaces. And now if you see them, you can literally pin them to that moment in time. And that's really not helpful, because if they still exist today, they wanted to look all futuristic and innovative. And now they look like, oh my God, you're so stuck in the past. So they've really not done themselves any favours by really embracing that current trend. And that's why I'd avoid things like that on the logo, because you want the logo to live kind of for, at least a fair degree of the life of the company. Whereas your visual identity, you might have a secondary typeface that you use for headlines and things like that. Cool, you could use that like futuristic digi-type font for like a year, and then when it starts to go out of fashion, you can kind of change that. And that's, I suppose, one of the reasons why people go quite safe with their corporate identity, their visual identity as well, is because they don't want to be, it is an investment to keep changing. Really hard to do brand with metrics, really hard. Marketing is much more easy to measure because you can put adverts, in fact, with marketing, we think of how, everything's data analytics and stuff now, but actually, brands back in the 60s and 70s in America, the big brands, your GM Motors and all that kind of stuff, they would put adverts in all the regional magazines, and they would put a coupon code in there. And it would be a different coupon code per publication. So that's how they would measure how effective each of their adverts were. And then they go, oh, okay, this advert's more effective, or this publication is more effective, and they'd double down on that. Brand's really, really hard to measure the effectiveness of, because you can't have, right, okay, James, we're going to have your one company, right, that we're going to do this brand for, and then we're going to have your other company and we're going to do a different brand, and A/B testing it. Like, you cannot do that. But in terms of updating it and evolving it, it's let's say you've got your brand, it's quite safe, it's all using like nice blues and things like that, all very safety, and actually the business develops and evolves, and actually you're all about tech and innovation, and that's what you want to be known for. We are innovators, we're fast-paced, we're dynamic, we're techy. We're suddenly those sort of very safe blues and everything. They start to not tell that story, I suppose. Whereas you could keep your logo exactly the same, but you could change up all your colours, you could change your typography, you could change the type of imagery you're using. So instead of using lots of lovely pictures of safe things, you start to use lots of pictures of dynamic things that are flexible and innovative and stuff like that. So that's how your visual identity could change without your logo actually changing. I think it's more than just, there's a lot of stuff that happens subconsciously with brand design, and that's why it's really tricky to sell, and sometimes really tricky to tell a client they're wrong and you're right, because it's subjective and it's opinion. But I'd say it's more than just like my gut feel or your gut feel, but I think we could both look at your business and go and kind of sit down, look at your website and go, right, what do you want to be known for? I want to be known for X, Y, and Z. Look at the website and go, that's not really coming across, is it? And you go, no, you're right. Okay. Or yes, it is. Or yes, it is mostly, but actually it's these bits that aren't really helping us. And then you can do some tweaking. Anyone else? No? Cool. Done. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the questions. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.